Welcome to July's Vane Monthly, where I wrap up the fortnightly posts we've had from the dev team over the past month or so, talk about what they've been working on and some of the upcoming changes to our favourite zombie survival game. As always, this is predominantly gameplay footage with some relevant pictures sprinkled in for you to watch and enjoy whilst I talk things through. Let's get into it. There's loads to get through in this monthly episode, including updates on when and why the devs released hotfixes, the work the devs have been doing on utility cabinets, base maintenance and player-constructed buildings, all the latest on animations, player character art upgrades, controller support, online fixes, new map areas, rebalancing work, and a host more. Let's kick off first with hotfixes. There were a couple of hotfixes released on the 24th of June, the day that I posted my June monthly, which I didn't cover then. So super briefly, they include a variety of different fixes primarily. Most notably, the Lifebringer perk in the survival skill tree wasn't working, RV beds clearing as spawns if you went too far away from them, corpse inventories having infinite capacity, foraging respawning too quickly, and some chair/couch sitting positions being corrected. Also introduced as part of the hotfixes was the ability to build a sawmill from the build menu, some networking improvements, and some game file structure changes in the hopes that this should make future updates quicker. The devs also issued an important update and clarification around why the devs released hotfixes and what does and doesn't make it into them. DeadZedje said that hotfixes for the team at Ramjet primarily are focused on bug fixes, and that features are usually pushed towards major updates like 0.024, released a couple of months ago, or 0.025, which will come next. He also said that when the team releases two hotfixes in quick succession, like they did at the end of June, this doesn't usually mean that they've forgotten something or were too hasty with the last hotfix before that. They want the game to be as stable as possible, so release hotfixes as frequently as they can without doing daily updates. Which explains why sometimes there are feature fixes alongside some relatively minor fixes, sometimes they'll have something fixed and we'll ship it in a hotfix alongside something that fixes something bigger because it just makes sense to. Importantly too, DeadZedje said that the team's development process involves working on bugs and new features simultaneously, so it's not that hotfixes are robbing us of development time on 0.025, this work is happening at the same time. And speaking of 0.025, let's talk about some other stuff the devs have been working on aside from hotfixes. Kicking things off with building maintenance and utility cabinets. Now, utility cabinets are set to get a whole lot of love from the devs in 0.025. One key change, which I'm sure is exciting many, me included, is the introduction of a flag system to set the area for your utility cabinet. This works by going to your utility cabinet and clicking Manage, which opens up the ability to add a flag and alter the area which your UC covers. You can then simply place a flag, then another flag, until you're happy with the area that your UC is covering. If you're trying to cover a larger area or need more flags, there are settings in the config menu which can be changed to allow a greater distance between flags and ultimately a larger area. This will be a welcome change away from the current somewhat arbitrary system where you plop a UC down and then have to put up with its radius, sometimes meaning you need to place multiple utility cabinets, or, as I've had to do in my Let's Play, increase the area that the UC covers. It's less than ideal though, as you can't be precise, however this will change with the new UC flag system. Also in the works and set to change is building maintenance. At present, you put the required scraps into your utility cabinet, and this stops player constructed, or in some cases like generators, player moved items from degrading and ultimately being destroyed and lost. Whilst the premise isn't set to change, the cost of maintaining your base, how the cost is calculated, and the impact of not maintaining your base is set to change from 0.025 onwards. DeadZedje has been doing a lot of work on base maintenance. Firstly, and linking into what we've just talked about, those of you who are more eagle-eyed may well have spotted the base maintenance multiplier, which is impacted by the size of the area your utility cabinet covers. That's right, moving forwards, the larger or smaller the area your utility cabinet, the larger or smaller the cost of maintaining your base will become. This will mean that having a larger base will require more scraps, so perhaps think carefully when you're placing those UC flags. In addition to the work the devs have done around adding a maintenance multiplier, the other work that Disseminate has been doing is how consequential not maintaining your base properly will be. There's been work done on ensuring that players will have to face some real consequences if they fail to maintain their bases. This could include, but isn't limited to, electrical brownouts, drinking water becoming dirty over time, weather impacting you more due to poor insulation, mold increasing the chance of your character becoming sick, all of these issues arising from poor property maintenance. Disseminate also said that there will be the ability to salvage items from other buildings, which would degrade those other buildings, but would enable you to receive crafting items for use in standalone buildings and constructions. Disseminate did say that this system is very much work in progress, but I think this is an exciting introduction. It'll be nice to be able to look after your base and be rewarded for doing so, perhaps not having to deal with those damp and mold patches. We'll have to wait and see. Another thing relating to bases that we know is receiving work is the ability to build our own bases and buildings from scratch. You can see on screen now the latest image that's been shared in relation to the self-build structures. Disseminate is hoping to have this in soon, and I for one am pretty excited by this too. It'll be interesting to see just how high the maintenance cost will be for player-built structures, as it's fair to expect these will be higher than taking on an existing established structure. Whilst talking about structures, one thing we're going to see changed in 0.025 is our churches. I covered this to some extent in June's monthly, so I won't spend too long on these here, but we have had shared with us some of the latest church imagery. Safe to say these will be a huge upgrade on what we currently have in game, and will introduce some added height to the game with usable bell towers for sniper nests too. In addition to churches, the devs are increasing the resolution of and are replacing some of the lower quality building textures in the game, which are, in the devs' own words, at least a few years out of date, so they're confident of upgrading them to modern graphical standards without compromising performance. Next up, let's talk animations, ahead of seeing the latest in terms of character art and vehicle art, before we talk translations, new map areas, rebalancing work, and controller support. Now, in terms of animations, we saw some initial work on the shotgun, Mosin Nagant, and bow and arrow animations. These have had further work done to them, with base and higher skill reload and use animations set to be introduced for 0.025. These animations have been created by Boone and Annie. There's also been new animations added for the 870, reload and inspect, so that now the gun can be inspected. These will be added as part of 0.0252. I'm excited for all of these animations. They'll add more depth to the game, especially the much requested bow and arrow animations, which look so much better than the lack of animation we currently have. I'll say again here, as I did in the last monthly, ignore the weird looking character arms here. These will be fixed as the new character models are rigged and added into the game. Still on animations, Boone is now working on blunt melee weapon animations, and Annie is working on double barrel shotgun animations, as well as some new bladed melee animations too. Disseminate said that the intention is to replace most, if not all, of the current melee weapon animations with custom-built, high-quality animations. This is great news. Anything to make combat feel more rewarding and more connected in terms of its feedback will be a welcome change in my book. From guns and weapons to cars, work is, as we can see here, continuing on vehicle models in the game. The plan being that all vehicles currently in-game will be replaced to ensure consistency, but also to ensure that each vehicle is modular, with working steering wheels that turn, gas or petrol caps that open, openable hoods or bonnets, openable boots or trunks, openable doors, fortunately we call doors in the UK and the US, but also included in the cars will be working speedometers and fuel gauges too, as well as the potential ability to remove things like bus seats, which for those eyeing the school buses up as a potential roaming base, I'm sure will be great news to hear. Disseminate said that the devs are, and I quote, going full throttle with this, and that they're starting with around 6 vehicles, including the school bus and RV, and of course the Sakudu commute sedan, which we've seen images of in this segment. It's unclear what, if any, of this work will be included in 0.025, so we'll have to wait and see. Still to come, we've got updates on translations, rebalancing, new map areas and controller support, but before we get stuck into that good stuff, an update on player character art. The player character artwork is, as we've discussed previously, being overhauled with new character art being built from the ground up. This will replace existing player character art and existing zombie character art, and is being created with future NPCs in mind. There's been a lot of progress made on the characters and, importantly, their hair. We'd all agree that character hair in the game at the moment on the placeholder characters is, well, interesting to say the least. We can see the progress being made in these images in terms of character hair, and Disseminate said that work is underway on the preliminary stages of integrating the new characters into the game, describing this as a tedious process, but he does think that they're closer to getting an alpha version of the new characters soon on the experimental beta branch. Disseminate did say back at the start of June it's probably going to be at least months before we get new characters in-game, so we may need to manage expectations as the switchover from old characters to new could well take some time, and whilst Disseminate has said he thinks they're close to getting an alpha version of the new characters into the experimental branch, this will be an alpha version and not the finished product, so we must keep that in mind. Now, in terms of translations, a lot of work is continuing on localization, ensuring that the game is playable with translations for a wider number of languages. For 0.025, there'll be the introduction of translations into Spanish, Dutch, Polish, Brazilian Portuguese, Swedish, Thai, Ukrainian, and traditional Chinese. This is excellent news and will ensure that Vane becomes playable for a whole host of new people, which can only be good news for the future. Right, before we get on to new map areas and controller support, let's talk about rebalancing. As we all know, in 0.024, Vane had its first rebalance since entering early access, generally aimed at making the game more challenging for players and increasing the consequences of poor decision making. This work has continued with DeadZedje, I'm sticking with that pronunciation until I'm corrected, doing some diligent work on more medical and condition refactors, with players on the experimental beta branch able to experience these changes now. As part of this work, ice packs and suture packs have been added for use with new medical changes, and console variables have been introduced for server owners to make hypothermia deadly as opposed to just causing frostbite and other condition effects. This has been requested by the community. Disseminate also shared a snapshot of all of the work that DeadZedje has been doing, which of course I've scoured through, with some interesting callouts I think, including the broken limb condition class, where splinting and natural recovery are options, and there's one that suggests that having a broken arm or leg will reduce the character's maximum health points too. The other callouts I'd make from this list are the bandages are no longer able to be applied to bites or gaping wounds without suturing first, and also that there seems to be some changes to terminology on their way, with bite and cut wound names being a story on this board, and scratches being refactored to minor wound, which could also be used by bites too. It'll be interesting to see these changes implemented, and perhaps even more interesting to see the community's feedback on the changes when 0.025 is released. My preference is usually for a game to make me regret my poor decision making, but I'm a bit of a sicko who likes being punished in these sorts of games. Right, let's talk new map areas and the work that the devs have been doing on new map additions, which should, hopefully, be in for 0.025. Zoe is leading on the map work, which will extend northwards of the existing Franklin County area. The new area will technically still be in Franklin County, so Disseminate said they'll have to figure out a name for it later. Excitingly though, the new area, whilst it's not anticipated to be a large addition in comparison to what we have now, will have a ski resort there, with a functioning chairlift. Disseminate also said there's some new art coming shortly too, specifically focused on some of the unique buildings coming in the next few map updates, but he kept the details on this close to his chest. Needless to say, unique buildings, new map areas, new art, these things get me excited for sure. Now let's talk controller support, and I'll also cover off some of the work the devs have been doing on stability, multiplayer and general fixes too. Disseminate has said that getting full controller support into the game requires a lot of work. Of course, at present you can use a controller for driving, combat and player movement, but when it comes to some of the context menus, you still need a keyboard and mouse. For the game to support controllers fully, all these menus need to work with a controller, and this is the work that Disseminate and Co are working on at present. There's not been any guarantee that this work will be in or completed for 0.025, but it remains a priority for the devs and is something they're consistently and actively working on and are steadily making progress with. Just before we jump into some of the other changes, it's time for what is now becoming a bit of a normal shout-out on these videos, but given the work they do is absolutely phenomenal, Rebalance has been working on some new music, which will also be introduced as part of 0.025, with 2 new night-themed tracks set to be introduced. Now, before we finish up, let's talk through some of the nuts and bolts work the devs have been doing. The stuff that we may not be able to see, or that doesn't have a pretty face, or an inspect mode to enjoy, but that is critical to ensuring the game is as smooth as possible. One of the aspects Disseminate has been working on is performance work for vehicles. No, not their 0 to 60 time, but the way they perform in-game. Disseminate says that they are one of the primary contributors to bad server performance, and he's managed to decrease their performance cost by a factor of 3 times. He says this is still yet to be tested on dedicated servers, but that this should be ready to go in for 0.025. Jan has continued work on multiplayer stability, tackling desync and an overhaul for vehicle networking, which is important work on the road to increased multiplayer stability and decreased desync. Disseminate has also been doing some work on lighting, with some sky lighting tweets set to be implemented as part of 0.025, specifically around dawn, dusk and nighttime, with improvements to the appearance of fog, moonlight and cloud colouring too. And that, I think, just about wraps up today's video and July's monthly. Let me know down in the comments what you're most looking forward to that the devs have been working on, and please do like and subscribe if you found this one helpful. Supporting me with a like and subscribe really does help me out. I'll catch you on Monday for my Let's Play and on Wednesday for another skull-cracking video. Catch you later.